The government in say June 2009, they have started with a foreign loan of 25 billion. Now it has a kind of almost $74 billion increase, which means it has went up to $99 billion.
Bangladesh is dreaming to be a developed nation within 2041. So can you give some recommendation that where the government should work on reform issues to transform the dream into reality? Bangladesh has taken 4.7 billion US dollar loan from International Monetary Fund in order to revive the economy. There are some conditions in the loan program, but Bangladesh has failed to fulfill some of the conditions. Why the government has failed to fulfill the conditions, we are going to discuss on this matter, and to discuss this we have guest Professor Rashed Mahmud Titumir, Chairman of Development Studies of Dhaka University. Welcome to our show. Can you please explain us why the Bangladesh government has failed to fulfill some of the conditions that were included in the IMF program?
The conditions which were laid out, as we all know, IMF comes to rescue a country which is in general parlor called bailout package. But I would frame it differently, that these are conditions that Bangladesh must fulfill in order to get out of the current crisis that has been plaguing not only in the economy, but more importantly adversely affecting the general masses. And within that general masses, it is salaried, low income and people living under poverty are worst hit. And as we know that Bangladesh is passing through highest ever food inflation in its 12 years time, and simultaneously about 1.5 years we are witnessing a highest ever inflation in the country, and this is a prolonged inflation that people have to endure. So what is really important, the two conditions that Bangladesh has not been able to fulfill are relating to its foreign exchange reserve, and secondly with the requirement of achieving gross domestic ratio of tax to gross domestic product. So these are two vital things in order for any country to have any kind of recovery from. So this is necessary for the country itself and particularly for the people in general. So what we have observed, and if we look at the data, there are certain indicators that suggest that economy is functioning in a particular way which has been to a greater extent dominated by oligarchic clientelism. And I would give you the examples and relate it with those two indicators. If you really look at that, Bangladesh has been maintaining a comfortable foreign reserve. To certain extent, it is quite a good pile of foreign exchange reserve. But what we observe that during the fiscal year 2021 and 2020 and 2021, and Bangladesh's fiscal year starts from 1st of July and ends on 30th June. So what we have seen during that period, there is a quantum jump in import. And if you really look at the statistics, normally the Bangladesh import is around to the tune of $60 billion. And what we have observed during that particular year, there has been a huge jump, almost by 30% to the level of $80 billion. What we have observed that these huge inflated import is before the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. If we are say for the sake of the argument, there was a 10% increase in global prices, right? If we are assuming due to the supply disruption, then it should not be a 30% and 30% jump.
Yeah.
or if we are looking at the statistics, that because most of our import goes through Chittagong port, and if you really looking at those data, then you don't find any reason to believe that there has been this quantum lift in terms of import. So, the allegation that the most of the research were suggesting that there are misinvoicing, there are processes like under invoicing and over invoicing, which is commonly known as capital flight from the country, and it continued for the next year as well, when we saw that the amount which is shown in terms of export figure and which is supposed to return to Bangladesh, but we see that Bangladesh Bank statistics suggest there is a anomaly of 9 to 12 billion dollar. So, what is shown as an export figure, but when we are looking at the export receipt, we see the differences. So, it really give credence to the allegation that there is a capital flight. So, if there is a capital flight, obviously there would be a drain on the foreign exchange reserve. So, that is one reason. Second reason, if you really look at the case of Bangladesh's foreign loan, and one would find a huge lift in terms of foreign loans. So, during the say 14 years of the current government, what we have observed that the government in say June 2009, they have started with a foreign loan of 25 billion. Now, it has a kind of almost $74 billion increase, which means it has went up to $99 billion.
These are private loan or
both the government and the private loan. So, there is another jump in terms of foreign loan. So, which is almost 322% jump in terms of foreign loan. So, if as we know that overall balance of payment, there are three accounts: current account balance, then the second is a capital account, and the third is a financial account. So, there is a huge drain in financial account on the account of payment of the loans, and this would continue because Bangladesh has undertook certain mega projects which has not been able to provide the benefit that they are supposed to provide, and but most importantly they are plagued by cost overrun, and every time the project has a particular completion date and it has always overshoot that completion rate. So, that has accumulated higher cost and that has a impact on the foreign loan. So, when this payment to the foreign loans in the financial account continues, and we have witnessed for the first time there is a negative financial account balance, and we have also seen because of the uncertainties associated with, there has not been there is a reduction in net foreign direct investment. So, that has also had an impact on the foreign on the financial account. And on the capital account, there has been a belt tightening by the central bank to reduce the trade gap or capital account gap. But even then, that has a different impact also on the investment and particularly on employment creation. I would go back to that later. But what we have seen that in case of current account, that in the remittance, which is one of the major sources of foreign currency inflow, that too has not been in coming through official account, and there is a diversion of that remittance inflow from the formal channel to the informal channel, which has there is an emergence of the unofficial market, and which would be very difficult to rein in even in the medium term. So, what you see, the inflow has gone down drastically, while the outflow has increased dramatically in both in terms of financial account, which is because of the payment of the loans, and on the other hand, and the remittance inflow has
gone down,
slowed down, or there is we do not know, it might go even negative, like which has went in terms of 2021 when there was a negative growth. So, we have seen that the net foreign reserve, if we are following the IMF's criteria BPM 6, then it would be around $17 billion. So what we observe, there is a clear indication of that the government has not taken forensic audit on the allegations made in terms of capital flight, which has occurred in current account. And the secondly, because there was not really policy farsightedness in terms of undertaking projects, which has accumulated the loan, which has overshoot, and then there is a outflow. So the both cumulatively has led to a situation where there is only drainage, and this would continue as we move forward, and it would be very difficult to achieve the target which is necessary. And on the second issue, which is the achievement of the revenue target, but we have seen that that has not been happened, because if you really look at the Bangladesh's National Board of Revenue, the way they collect revenue, there are subsidies given to particular entities of political connections, and then there are huge tax evasion, then there are tax exemption, then there are tax avoidance, or there are also we have not seen, there is a transfer pricing cell, but we have not seen any action on the account of how this transfer pricing has impacted in terms of tax collection. So what we observe that Bangladesh's tax GDP ratio is almost at the low level at a global scale, and it is the lowest in South Asia excepting the war-torn Afghanistan. The question is always, and people have asked two questions with regard to revenue mobilization. One is that if our size of the GDP is that, then why there is a so low tax GDP ratio? So which means that there are also questions about this size of the GDP, the way it is shown. So whether it is a politically headlined one or really that amount exists, and if such exists, then there is a scope for huge collection. Even if it is lower than what government is suggesting, then there is also a scope for tax collection. But we do not see that tax net is increasing, nor we see that our number one, which is income tax, which is a progressive tax, that is also not increasing. Rather, every government comes and says that we would be coming up with a progressive taxation, but what we have seen in reality, that is not there. Most importantly, that general mass have to pay more taxes in terms of consumption taxes.
So I want to add something, that our NBR is always giving tax pressure who are paying tax already.
Yes.
So this is the normal practice.
Exactly. So what we see that, and you spot on the point. So the increase that we see currently, even though meager, is due to increase of the consumption tax, which is a regressive tax, which is a income indifference tax, value added tax, right?
Yeah.
And that is not also, the increase is not that at a high level, because I would rather argue that increase is because of the inflated price. So if there is an inflation, obviously the collection would go up. But what you haven't seen, that trade related taxes has gone down, because there is a belt tightening measures in current account, reducing the current account deficit. So import has gone down, so obviously the collection has gone down as well. And simultaneously, if there is hardly any economic activities, that has not increased, rather economic activities has contracted. So the farms are not adequately making profits, so the income tax has not also gone up. So it is creating a situation where there is a low level equilibrium trap, and because the government has not been able to collect revenue, so government is not able to really address the moot question which is touching everyone's life, is inflation in the event of reduction in real wage. So it is expected that the government should be bringing out with new programs to address so that people do not slide into poor. So, we do not witness a new poor. Though what we have seen already, the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics suggests that at the outcome level, despite having the highest earmarked allocation, the poverty has increased in Dhaka division. In the absence of prudent social safety net program, there is always a maximum likelihood that people might end up being new poor. So, which was complicated the situation. So, what we are witnessing is a process where the government has not been able to address three major questions that is agitating everyone's mind, and that is impacting three actors or three agents of the economy, which is farms or business, and particularly within that business is the small, medium, micro enterprises are hard hit, which used to be the largest employer. Then the secondly, households are in deep distress because of the long run effect of the inflation. And third, government is also in a precarious position because on the one hand, it has not been able to mobilize the revenue, while it has continued to depend on loans, borrowing, and that has put the government in another position of that. If you look at the government's current account, the major expenditure, the number one item is payment of interest. So, on the account of the principal. So, government is a situation of high indebtedness, and one might argue that the debt GDP ratio is not alarming, but I would argue that don't look at the ratio. What is really important is to look at, if you look at the case of Japan, it has a 200-300% sometimes debt GDP ratio, or if you are looking at USA, but they have their command over the foreign exchange. So, which means that they give to the market a signal that they can repay the amount. And secondly, and most importantly, they are either, in case of USA, greenback, which has a command over its own currency, or they are indebted to its own people. So, it is not the ratio that is quite important, it is the current situation that we are in, which is economic insecurity. That is a major problem, and we require actions.
Professor Titumir, can you give some recommendation that what the government should do in order to raise the foreign exchange reserve and the revenue to GDP ratio?
Yes, this is a moot point that we have to really work out, and what we have observed that according to our understanding, we know the causations. As I said, that why there was a fast fall in terms of balance payment, it is because of the capital flight. But we have not seen any kind of action in terms of forensic audit that would give a signal to the market that you cannot engage in capital flight. Secondly, we have not seen any signal that in terms of giving it to the informal market, reduction in hundi and hawla, those informal mechanism, because there has been a proliferation of this diversion of remittance from formal channel to the informal channel. So, that has not been there, because if you are giving market a signal that there is an action, then market would start correcting itself. Third, we have not seen that there is an action in terms of the mega projects that has been taken without really looking at the allocative efficiency as well as impact on the general people. If any action does not really enhances employment, or it does not provide you any efficiency, or if it does not really reduce the transaction cost, or if it really doesn't have a multiplier effect, then what is the point of having that project? So that has not been, there has been always a kind of a cosmetic rhetoric talk with regard to bringing efficiency in terms of undertaking project, but we have not seen that. And the third, the way the debt is managed, because what we have seen that the debt has gone up without really looking at the burden it would have on the people in general, and we have not seen that, and a calculation, how do you manage debt and how do you ensure that has not been, there is no clear. And fourth important point, as we have seen that the tax GDP ratio has remained so low. So why it is? Because as you rightly mentioned that there is always a tendency to burden who is following the rules, but there is no effort in terms of really addressing those people who are engaged in tax avoidance, tax and the way tax exemptions are given, particularly in terms of subsidies. We have to really look at whether that subsidy creates employment or that subsidy helps people in terms of reduction in poverty, or whether that creates a multiplier effect in terms of infrastructure deficit that we have. We have not seen that. And with regard to tax, you see, we have a very limited income in terms of land revenue, but we have that offices down to the grassroots level. But we have not seen, there are a lot of discussion about growth centers, but there is hardly any initiative in terms of really ensuring. There are a lot of discussion about digital Bangladesh, but we have not seen enough actions in terms of collecting tax at the source level. So the point that I have always mentioned is about that there is a direct relationship between the political settlement and economic outcome, because it is the institution that if that functions, then you have a what we want to achieve, which is a peaceful, prosperous Bangladesh, which ensures human dignity, which provides and provide justice, which uphold the human rights. But we are not getting there, and there are all possibilities of getting there. But what is required is to move from the current skewed political distribution, where the power is concentrated in few, to that of a political settlement where median population exercises the social contract. So the citizen and the state, there is a, so we need to move towards a new political settlement. But what is, some people might say that's a far cry, or that's a long ask, but I would argue differently, because the history of Bangladesh suggests that we can come up with homegrown solutions, because as we know, everyone is aware of the causes of the current predicaments, what is required actions instead of rhetorics. So we do not get into the route of austerity measures, which would penalize the general masses who have nothing to do. They are victims of a process. They are not creator of this dysfunctionalities of the economic management itself. So we need a new departure, and that departure has to be understood in a way and crafted in a way so that there is a immediate action. So there has to be strategies for that, there has to be implementation action, and we can do it. And then there are medium term issues, like there is a real concern about human resources, because it is not meeting the needs of the market, and we have seen how there is also we have to import people from outside, and simultaneously we have seen that there is a huge dent on the economy on the account of health expenditure and education expenditure, because the rich are sending their kids, or they are getting treatment, health care from abroad, and which has implications on the national economy itself. So what we see, that there is a elite crisis, because elite is not sufficiently creating a situation where there is a solution. But I am quite hopeful in the sense that we would be embarking on a homegrown endogenous solution to have a new political settlement. Definitely we need, we are in an interdependent world, we are interconnected, and there are universalities of certain things in terms of rights, in terms of entitlements. That's regular, because this is indivisible rights. But what is more important, that we need dialogues, and I am hopeful that there would be dialogues, because we understand perfectly well the major question before in terms of political settlement is that of that a no political party has been able to transfer power to another political party. That's a major political question, and that has an implications on the institution of Bangladesh, because we have not seen in our over 50 years of journey as an independent country. But at what we are hopeful that we have always been creative, and we want to pursue a Bangladesh that we desire. We want to actualize our potential. We want to realize the Bill of Independence suggests of equality, human dignity, and social justice. As of now, we require a new departure from the current mismanagement of the economy in order to cool off the inflation that has a disproportionate impact on the people in general. And there are hardly people talk about the silent cry that intermediate classes or middle classes are enduring, and obviously the impact has a aggravated livelihoods and caused distress amongst the salaried, low income, and people living below the poverty line, because we have witnessed in recent times that at the outcome level poverty has increased in Dhaka division, and during this last 12 years the Gini coefficient, which is not a perfect indices to measure income inequality, but even said then that has really went to an alarming level. So the choice before us, what road we would take, and we have to take the road that is less traveled by. But I am hopeful and quite optimistic that we would be coming up with a homegrown solution for this new political settlement.
Professor Titumir, Bangladesh is dreaming to be a developed nation within 2041. So can you give some recommendation that where the government should work on reform issues to transform the dream into reality?
As I have said, there are three issues we have to really work on. One is to address the immediate need, which is how do we address the inflation crisis that we are currently enduring, and which has a huge adverse impact, because this has become a prolonged phenomenon. So since it has a prolonged phenomenon in the absence of rise in real wage, while there has not been a universal social security, the social safety net programs which are plugged by these are fragmented. Nobody knows how many are there. Some people would say 82 programs, some people would say 115 programs. So they are fragmented, and there are inclusion and exclusion error. So it is very difficult even to send any kind of targeted assistance given the nature of it. And secondly, we have really a reduced cash availability or resource availability because of the low tax GDP ratio. There is hardly any fiscal water in terms of helping that generation. So what we need is how do we address the inflation? That's the number one, and we can address it quite capably and quite efficiently if we are really allowing the institutions to function, and that's not a very difficult task. Secondly, in terms of, as I said, in terms of current account deficit, fiscal account deficit and overall balance of payment deficit in order to ensure a healthy reserve, so that the way the credit rating agencies have downgraded us, but and in a series, in 6 months, in a 2 months row, it started with Modi, then it went to S&P and then to Fitch, and what we have seen that they have downgraded so that has an impact on the investment as well. So on the one hand, if we can really start the forensic audit in terms of capital flight, then that would give a signal to the market, and that would also would have an impact on the assessment of the credit rating agency, because they were also saying that there is a liquidity crunch, but what is also there is that the institution has not acted. So when they would be seeing institution, so what we have observed that there is a decrease in net foreign direct investment. So such investment assessment, because these companies allows the both institutional and private investors to continue to invest, because you have seen what is the condition in capital markets. So that can give a positive signal to the market. What is required is a positive signal to the market that there are effective institution and that acts. That's number one. In order for the reserve fall to not to decline sharply, so first we have to arrest the decline of the reserve and gradually build up the reserves. So that's one. Secondly, in terms of inflation, as I've said, that how do really there is a lot of talk about ensuring that at that household list, but we haven't seen that. So those who have done that list, at least in terms of national ID, they have done more or less not a near perfect but some perfect. So we need to really reach those people so that their consumption goes up, because as we have seen that recently, due to lowering of due to negative real wage, and secondly that has a impact in terms of reduced consumption, that is also visible. So that would increase the consumption, and that would create from a vicious cycle to a virtuous cycle of the economy. So if the consumption goes up, but that won't really solve the main problem unless we can have an action on the stagnant private sector investment, because if you want to reduce poverty, the only option is to create and generate jobs, and that's not there because of the, as we have seen there in recent past, there has been a decline in private investment with regard to GDP, and before that it has remained stagnant over the decades. So if we are and we in the medium term, we have to really move towards expanding productive capacity, meaning currently the government is the single source of our production, major source, and it has concentrated in terms of export earning. Almost it has gone to 85% level of our export, and so we need to diversify, we need to increase our productivity, we need to increase our competitiveness, and more so in the view of when we would be moving from the current process, which is enjoying a form of subsidy in terms of everything but arms initiative. So when we move to another phase with a graduation from the LDCs to developing countries, so that won't be there unless there is a increased productivity, unless there is a product diversification, unless there is a competitiveness, you can't really ensure that. So we have to gradually move from the current consumption led growth strategy to the investment driven strategy, and we have to reverse the current trend of deindustrialization, because we have seen that there is a negative absorption in manufacturing sector. So unless you have a decent job and if the living wage do not go up, then you all won't be Bangladesh economy won't be able to any shock from outside, and we have seen how that devastating COVID shock has really created and generated new and most importantly in the midterm, we have seen there is a huge capability problem in terms of our human resources, and mostly our youth unemployment is very high. The requirement of skills are not there. So the university system has to really move to generate skills and embark in innovation and R&D. So there is a huge reform that is required in education sector, and health sector, as we have seen, that it is plugged by a system where there is a lesser confidence and there is a high drainage in terms of health care taken by wealthy outside. So there is what we need is a healthcare system which is referral, which is accountable to its community. So which means that I will fringe by the third agenda in terms of medium term, which is decentralization. But I would rather advocate for not for decentralization, rather for devolution. And I am quite hopeful that given the Bangladesh's history and track record, we would be moving towards the new political settlement, which I would call a second republic, and that would take care of this, and there would be dialogue, there would be conversation, and there would be homegrown solution.
Thank you, Professor Titumir, for being with us. We are available in Facebook and YouTube channel. Stay tuned with the Daily Star.